She's standing backstage in London, 18 years old, and in a few minutes, her whole life is about to split into a before and an after. 95 girls from 95 countries are competing for one crown that night, the most contestants Miss World had ever seen. And out of all of them, a teenager from Jamshedpur, a girl who once dreamed of being an aeronautical engineer, not a movie star, is about to hear her name called. That was the year 2000. That night made her famous overnight. But here's what almost nobody talks about. Fame that arrives that fast, that early, comes with a debt attached. And Priyanka Chopra would spend the next 2 decades paying it off, piece by piece, proving over and over again that a crown isn't a career, and a career isn't the same thing as a legacy. I want to tell you her story today. Not the highlight reel version, not the magazine cover version. I want to walk you through the actual moments, the risky decisions, the public failures, the years where people whispered that she was finished. Because underneath all of it is one lesson that I think most of us never learn until it's too late. And that lesson is this: you can chase a career your whole life and still end up forgettable. Or you can build something that outlives the applause. Let's get into it. Picture this. It's the mid-2000s in Mumbai. Priyanka has already won the crown, already broken into Bollywood, already got the cameras following her around. On paper, she's arrived. But behind the scenes, her early run of films is inconsistent. Some hits, a lot of misses. Critics start writing her off as just another pageant queen who got lucky with a title and a pretty face. That phrase follows actresses like a shadow in that industry. It's dismissive, it's reductive, and it's designed to make you feel like whatever you build next isn't really yours. It's just borrowed shine from a crown you won as a teenager. And here's the part that doesn't get said enough. The pressure on a Miss World winner in Bollywood isn't just to act. It's to prove, constantly, that you deserve to be there at all. Every role becomes an audition for legitimacy. Every flop becomes evidence for the people who already doubted you. By the mid-2000s, after a string of films that didn't land the way she needed them to, there were real conversations in the industry about whether her moment had already passed. Not later, not eventually. Already. She was still in her early 20s, and people were writing the obituary for a career that had barely started. I want you to sit with that for a second, because most of us think the hardest part of building something is starting it. It's not. The hardest part is surviving the season where people decide, out loud, that you're done, while you're still standing right there, still working, still showing up to set every single day, with people quietly wondering if you're worth casting. So what did she do? She didn't chase safety. She didn't retreat into roles that were easy or expected. In 2008, she took on fashion, playing a supermodel who spirals into addiction and self-destruction before clawing her way back. A role that demanded she go somewhere dark and complicated instead of just being decorative on screen. Then in 2009 came Kamini, a gritty genre-bending film that had nothing to do with glamour and everything to do with range. These weren't safe bets. These were the kind of roles that could have backfired badly if she hadn't pulled them off. And both of them landed. Both of them became turning points that critics pointed to as proof she was a serious actor, not a headline attached to a crown. Here's the principle buried inside that stretch of her life. When people try to define you by your worst season, the only real answer is better work, not louder defense. She didn't go on shows explaining why the critics were wrong. She didn't post long statements about being underestimated. She just kept choosing harder roles instead of comfortable ones, kept betting on her own growth instead of her own image. And slowly, the narrative flipped itself. That's the first real lesson in this whole story. Legacy isn't built by convincing people you're good. It's built by becoming so undeniably good that the conversation moves on without needing your permission. Now, fast forward to 2015. This is where the story gets genuinely bold. Maybe even a little reckless if you think about it honestly. Picture the position she was in. By this point, she'd already banked more than 50 Bollywood films. She'd already won multiple Filmfare Awards. She was, by any reasonable measure, one of the biggest stars in the most prolific film industry on earth. She had nothing left to prove in India, and that's exactly the moment she chose to walk away from it, to sign a talent deal with ABC Studios and fly to America to audition for a network television show in a language and an industry that had almost no track record of embracing lead actors who looked like her. Let that sink in. She wasn't running toward Hollywood because Bollywood had failed her. She was leaving the mountaintop to start climbing a completely different mountain from the bottom, with no guarantee anyone in America even knew her name. The hidden struggle here isn't really about talent. It's about risk with your reputation attached to it. If Quantico had flopped, if American audiences had shrugged, the story written about her wouldn't have been, she tried something bold. It would have been, she left a sure thing for a gamble that didn't pay off. That's the version of the story that never got written, but it was sitting right there as a very real possibility. She herself has talked about how nervous she was going into it. New geography, new language for her on-screen persona, a whole new audience that had zero context for who she already was to millions of people back home. That kind of fear is real, and she walked into it anyway. Then came the turning point. Quantico premiered in 2015, and she landed the lead role of Alex Parrish, an FBI recruit turned suspected terrorist. And here's the versified, remarkable fact. She became the first person of South Asian descent to headline an American network drama series. Not a supporting role, not a guest arc, the lead, the face of the poster. Critics took notice fast. The kind of reviews that don't just praise a performance, but acknowledge you're witnessing a shift in an entire industry's willingness to see who gets to be a lead. That show ran for 3 seasons, and it cracked a door open that a lot of actors from South Asia are still walking through today. The principle in this chapter is one of the harder ones to actually live by. Sometimes the biggest risk to your legacy isn't failing. It's staying comfortable inside a success you've already outgrown. She had every reason to stay exactly where she was. Nobody would have blamed her, but comfort was never the goal. Being first, being undeniable, being someone whose work opened doors for the next generation, that was the goal. And you don't get there by protecting what you've already built. You get there by risking it for something bigger. Now here's where the story shifts again, because building a legacy was never just about acting for her. This is the part people miss the most, I think, because it's less cinematic. It doesn't have a red carpet moment attached to it. In 2015, the same year Quantico premiered, she also launched her own production company, Purple Pebble Pictures, with a specific mission to support regional Indian cinema. Films in languages and regions that big studios usually ignore because they're not seen as commercially safe. That's not a vanity project. That's someone using the leverage she'd fought for to make space for stories that wouldn't otherwise get told. Around the same period, she deepened her work as a UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador, a role she'd taken on years earlier, focused on child rights and education. The kind of work that doesn't trend on social media the way a movie premiere does, but quietly shapes actual policy conversations and actual funding for kids who will never know her name. She wrote a memoir, Unfinished, that became a New York Times bestseller, where she talked openly about identity, about not fitting into any one box, not fully Indian to some, not fully American to others, and about the exhaustion of constantly having to prove she belonged in rooms she'd already earned a seat in. And she moved into entrepreneurship too, backing ventures and building a hair care brand, stepping into rooms where actors are rarely taken seriously as business minds, not celebrity endorsements. Here's the hidden struggle in this stretch of her story, and it's a subtle one. When you're already famous, the easiest thing in the world is to let your name do the work. Slap it on a product, show up for a photo, collect a check, move on. That's a career move. It requires almost no risk. But that's not what she did with most of these ventures. She put in the work of actually building things. A production company with a real slate of films, advocacy work that required showing up in unglamorous meetings and unglamorous places. A memoir that required actual vulnerability instead of a curated highlight reel. The struggle isn't a dramatic public failure this time. It's the quiet discipline of choosing the harder, slower version of legacy over the easier, faster version of just being famous. And that's the turning point in this chapter, if you want to call it that. It's not one moment, it's a pattern of decisions. Every time she had the choice between cashing in on her name and actually building something that would outlast the trend cycle, she chose the harder path. That's the difference between a career and a legacy in one sentence, honestly. A career is what you get paid for. A legacy is what still exists after nobody's paying you for it anymore. The principle here is the one I think matters most for anyone watching this, who isn't a movie star, who's never going to walk a red carpet. Your name, your reputation, whatever platform you've built, no matter how small, it can either be a shortcut you cash in, or it can be a foundation you build on. Cashing it in feels good immediately. Building on it feels slow and sometimes invisible. But only one of those options is still standing in 20 years. Let's bring this up to where she is now, because the story doesn't stop at any single achievement. That's actually the whole point. After Quantico, she kept expanding into film work that most people wouldn't have predicted for a former pageant queen from Mumbai. She took a role in The White Tiger, a raw, unglamorous, morally complicated film that had nothing to do with looking good on screen and everything to do with disappearing into a character. She stepped into the Matrix universe. She kept working across continents, across industries, across mediums, acting, producing, advocacy, business, never letting herself get boxed into being just one thing. And here's what I think is the real hidden struggle in this current chapter of her life. The temptation. Once you've already proven yourself, once you've already got the awards and the box office numbers and the magazine covers, is to just coast. To let the resume speak for itself. Nobody would fault her for slowing down at this point. She's already made history multiple times over. But if you look at the pattern of her choices, decade after decade, that's never been the move. The struggle now isn't proving she belongs. She settled that argument a long time ago. The struggle now is resisting the gravity of her own success, the pull toward comfort that hits everyone once they've already won enough to stop trying so hard. The turning point, if we're being honest, isn't a single event anymore. It's a mindset she seems to have settled into a long time ago, that every level of success is just a new floor to build the next room on, not a ceiling to relax under. She said it herself, in that line that's become something close to her personal motto: don't try to squeeze into a glass slipper. Shatter the glass ceiling instead. That's not a quote about ambition for its own sake. That's a quote about refusing to shrink yourself to fit spaces that were never built with you in mind. and choosing instead to expand the space itself so other people can walk through it after you. And that brings us to the principle I think ties this entire journey together. A legacy isn't one big moment. It's not the crown in 2000. It's not the lead role in 2015. It's not any single award or any single headline. A legacy is the accumulation of every decision where you chose growth over comfort, where you chose the harder, riskier, more meaningful path over the easy win that was sitting right there waiting for you. Nobody builds a legacy by accident. You build it one uncomfortable decision at a time, across years, sometimes across decades, often without knowing yet how the story is going to end. So here's what I really want you to take from all of this. It's not, look how amazing she is. That's not the point of telling you her story. And honestly, if that's all you take away, I've failed to actually make my point. The point is, what her path proves is possible for anyone, in any field, at any starting point. She wasn't handed a legacy. She was handed criticism, doubt, an industry that tried to define her by her worst season, and a whole new country that had no idea who she was when she showed up ready to start over from nothing. Every single chapter of her story required her to choose the harder option when an easier one was sitting right there. That's not a special talent reserved for movie stars. That's a decision available to every single person watching this right now. You don't need 95 countries watching you to start building something that outlasts you. You don't need a crown or a studio deal or a magazine cover. What you need is the willingness to keep choosing the version of your work, your relationships, your reputation that's built to last, instead of the version that just feels good this week. A career pays your bills. A legacy changes what's possible for the people who come after you. And the wild thing is, you get to decide, right now, today, which one you're actually building. Not someday, not when you've made it. Right now, in whatever room you're sitting in, with whatever you've got in front of you. So before you go, I want you to do something with me. Think about the one word that captures what you're actually trying to build. Not your job title, not your 5-year plan. The real thing underneath it. Maybe it's freedom, maybe it's impact, maybe it's family, maybe it's proof. Whatever that word is for you, drop it in the comments below. I read every single one, and I want to see what you're building toward. And if this story moved you even a little, if it made you think differently about the difference between chasing a career and building something that actually lasts, hit subscribe and come be part of the Golden Grace family. We tell these stories every week, the real ones, the unfiltered ones, because I truly believe your story is still being written too. So go write your golden chapter. Nobody else is going to write it for you.